Since I already had a full white build in the HUF 700 Evo, I decided to use their other AIO, which is also in white, so it kind of pairs it up and stuff like that. But regardless of the color scheme and everything else, I decided to use the Cooler Master MasterLiquid PL360 Flux in white and place it inside the same build and eventually give you some comparison between the two AIOs that I recently have. Well, basically this one, the PL360, and the Atmos 360 as well. So it kind of is interesting to check out from the same brand two different AIOs and to get some benchmarks and thermals and all the other stuff, right? Well, today is quite interesting day because we actually get to do that, and with the PL360 Flux, and I think I already did a build with the PL360, but it was in black. So today we have a cool AIO, without a doubt. It does perform quite nicely, solidly. You'll see the results quite shortly. But let's check out some features and specs before we dive into those. As you remember, covering the HUF 700 Evo, it has the addressable Gen 2 RGB, and the PL360 Flux also has it. So this is a Gen 2 RGB controller, which is included inside the box, and it is compatible with Master Plus 2. Since the HUF 700 Evo has that as well, I didn't use the actual controller from the box because there is no difference, but it's quite cool to actually have that controller with this one, since addressable RGB headers and PWM headers aren't daisy chainable, and you do have to connect them to something. So if you don't have a HUF 700 Evo that already has this type of controller, you'll have to manage it somehow. Thankfully, we have a controller that actually makes it easier for you guys to connect all three fans and the pump block top to adjust the lights, of course. Then we have a quite interesting pump, so performance dual chamber, without a doubt. We have something similar with Atmos 360, and it is designed for optimized flow and pressure targeting hotspots for precision heat dissipation. Now that is quite similar with the Atmos 360, so it's going to be quite interesting to check that out. It comes with three 120 enhanced cycle flow fan blades, which comes to a point where we're talking about dimensions of the fan 120 to 120 25.8. We have, of course, addressable Gen 2 RGB LED, three pieces, and the speed goes from 0 to 2300 RPMs. Airflow at maximum is 72.37 CFM. Air pressure is 2.96 millimeters HO, and mean time before failure is 160,000 hours, which is outstanding. The maximum noise level is 32 decibels, and honestly, with that high RPM, you can lower it down and lower down the decibels as well, making it, let's say, quite bearable. And then for the bearing, we have ORBS. Connector for the speed and for the rotation is 4-pin PWM. Talking about addressable RGB, standard 3-pin 5 volts addressable RGB. So this Gen 2 doesn't change the fact of basically the connector whatsoever. It's just something in the software that gives you better lights, let's put it this way. The pump mean time before failure is 210,000 hours. Noise level is up to 15 decibels, which is quite outstanding. I do have to say, power consumption is 6 watts, and it uses 4-pin PWM connector for the rotation and 3-pin addressable RGB for the lights. You have 5-year warranty, but that's not all. The CPU socket support goes up to LGA 1700, which also includes 2066, 2011 from Intel, and then when we go to AMD, it goes up to AM5, and it supports Threadripper TR4. Now, for the water block dimensions, 89 times 75 times 40, and radiator dimensions, 394 times 111.6 times 27.2. So basically, it's quite interesting that we have these decimals when we're talking about the thickness. So altogether, fan plus the radiator is 53 millimeters. And finally, the material for the radiator is aluminum. Now, since you're already used to me using the AMD platform for reviews and everything else, I'm going to continue that with a tutorial on how to place it on your processor. So basically what it is that you need to do, I mean, to be honest, the accessory box is quite interesting because you have loads of stuff going on inside, and specifically because you need loads of stuff for the Intel socket mounting. But when we take into consideration mounting it on AMD, well, specifically on AM5 platform, you only have two brackets that go on the pump block top. You use 4 screws to attach those, and then what you have to do is, well, basically 12 screws for the fan mounting on the radiator, 12 screws to mount the radiator on your case, and that's it. Tab the locking nuts, but it doesn't kind of go in that order. So basically, when you place your motherboard inside your chassis, you have those retention brackets. You do need to leave those, so the pump block top has 2-point contact on your processor compared to the Atmos 360 that actually has 4-point contact, which is definitely better. And after that, you place your thermal paste on your processor, remove that plastic foil from the bottom copper base so it actually has a contact to your processor. And of course, don't forget to place those two brackets on the CPU block with 4 screws to actually have some tension when we're talking about block towards the processor. And that's it. Tie up those two locking nuts. That's all. Connect the cables. Yeah, totally forgot about that. But connect the cables, and depending on the motherboard, depending on the case, you can either go with the controller that is included inside the box, and it's really straightforward. You just need to connect addressable RGB to it. You use a 3-way splitter for the fans that are on the radiator and connect them to PWM header on your motherboard. And yeah, that's it. That's really straightforward, right? Now, let's dive into benchmarks and check out what we can expect. Well, basically, PL360 Flux compared to Atmos 360. So what now happens is a direct comparison with two AIOs from the same brand, and this kind of makes it interesting when you're deciding which one to choose. Of course, one looks a bit different, has a 3D possibility to adjust the pump block top to your liking and stuff like that. The other one has a rotational possibility on the pump block cover and similar stuff, right? Yeah. So the performance, when we're talking about the PL360 Flux, it does perform quite nicely. And when we go into AIDA 64 Extreme Edition, we start at 86 degrees, 4800 megahertz, and GPU is 52 degrees, but regardless of that. So when we compare that to Atmos 360, the CPU was 81 degrees, which is 5 degrees lower. The clock speed did go up by 4825, and the GPU is 51. So I don't know, it shouldn't affect the GPU, the actual heat from the processor. So I think this was just a marginal error or something like that. But when we go into Cinebench, it's quite interesting because it starts at 80 degrees compared to Atmos 360, which starts at 76. And then it slightly builds up from 81 to 82 and kind of varies from those two thermals. And the clock speed go from 4975, eventually drops down to 4950 depending on the scenario and depending on the thermals and everything else, as you already know how it goes. The benchmark starts in 26,169, it boosts up immediately in the second run at 26,360, and then it goes down back to somewhat a normal standard, let's say, Cinebench points when we're talking about the thermals and of course the clock speed around 26,190. Comparing this to Atmos 360, we have 76 to 77, clock speed 50, 125 is definitely about 26,400 and something ish, so nothing too drastic. What I can say is it's quite interesting, as I already said that basically, but regardless, it's quite interesting to check out the comparison. The difference in thermals is a bit bigger than I expected, but the clock speed and the actual Cinebench points aren't giving that much of a difference when we're talking about the thermals, because usually if you use completely different AIO and the thermals and you check it out, you see loads of difference in Cinebench points, right? But in this scenario, it actually didn't make such a difference. 200 to 250, eventually 260 Cinebench points, and that's still solid. I'm really impressed with both of the AIOs because they do perform quite nicely and still keep the thermals a bit lower than usual when you can expect, right? So definitely recommendations when we compare both of these. I mean, it's all up to you to decide if you're okay and willing to take those 4 to eventually maybe 5 degrees higher thermals to go with PL360 Flux, and yeah, that's it. The fans are outstanding, as I already said. When you set up a curve in your BIOS and when you adjust the thermals compared to everything, you don't have to worry about, let's say, the noise coming from them. And the pump is dead silent. I mean, I'm really surprised. I don't know what is actually happening in BIOS, but it's showing that the pump is going up to 10k RPMs, which is a bit, it's not strange, but it is shocking, and I'm not quite sure if it really is 10k RPM and then 15 decibels. So if it's either a flaw in the BIOS on this motherboard, specifically this motherboard, but other AIOs didn't have that kind of, let's say, malfunction in BIOS and showing those kind of high RPMs. Regardless of that, the Cooler Master MasterLiquid PL360 Flux White Edition, and of course you have it in black, with Cycle Flow 3 120mm fans, dual chamber pump, and rotational cover to adjust it depending on the orientation. As you can see, I had to orient it without a doubt. Yeah, the links are in the description so you can check it out. And if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for future content coming quite shortly. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.